Good morning, and you're watching the Threatt Report, and I'm Leon Threatt. Honored to be with you this very day on the Threatt Report. We got a number of encouraging things to share. Before I get involved and into the details of what I'm going to be sharing today, let me just share and communicate some very important points here. Kind of a recap on a few important things. First of all, remember, why are we doing the Threatt Report? Because we believe it's important to speak the truth in love. I'm committed to speaking the truth in love. And then we see that in Ephesians 4:15, but then also St. John 8:32. And it says, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Truth is what sets us free. And we know that Jesus Christ is the truth. I'm purposing to be sharing on the Threatt Report a biblical worldview on the number of issues that are facing us as believers in Christ and as a nation. And so I'm committed to just sharing, communicating, and getting my voice out there. So with that, I want to encourage you to share this website, this information, this Facebook, and prayerfully you can also go to the YouTube. And we're looking for other ways to get the messaging out. I know that some have asked that we would find a way to maybe do this on podcasts or just on a line or phone line, but we're looking for ways. Please be patient with us if you would, as we look for creative ways to get the messaging out. You can go to leonthreatt.com on our website, and you can go to past histories of messaging or communications that we've put out. There are written articles out there on the various subjects that we've talked about. There's a resource of information that you can get from the website. That's leonthreatt.com. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at the Threatt Report. That's Threatt report at gmail.com. And so we will be available to you. Now, here's an important piece of announcement. There's a number of things going on to pray and intercede for our nation. And we're participating. Me, my family, and much of my church are participating in the Billy Graham or the Franklin Graham Prayer March in Washington, D.C. on the 26th of September. Also in that same time, same location, is the Return, sponsored by Jonathan Kahn. And that gathering is pretty much all day, Washington, D.C. from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. But we're taking a bus trip to participate in both of these events. We'll arrive there on Saturday morning, about 11:30. And if you would like to go with us, if you'd like to take the bus ride with us, it is $55. You can register on our website, cfccharlotte.com, cfccharlotte.com. Go to the menu there, and you can register and pay your $55. Now, please get the word out. Get registered real quickly, because these 40 seats will go rather quickly. Normally we would be able to take 60 or more, but because of the coronavirus, we have been limited to 40 seats, and many of the seats are already taken. So if you like your family and friends to go, certainly pass this on. No children. Now, we can take early teens or mid-teens and teenagers, but not children, because of the nature, the intensity of this trip. It's a long day, but it is a worthy endeavor. And I want to encourage you to be a part of this. Please pray for our nation, stand in the gap. Now, I do know of a number of other locations that are hosting a live streaming of the Return. If you'd like to be a part of that, you can reach out to us, email me, and then at the Threatt Report at gmail.com, and I'll send you some information on some of the sites that I'm aware of that is hosting a live streaming of it. Now, let me give you a quick update on a few things. First of all, I mentioned last week, but I don't think I communicated it as in-depth as I would have liked to, concerning the coronavirus, COVID-19. There are still things going on. We know that Congress is still trying to work through the second stimulus packet, but I don't want to encourage you to wait on that. But what really gets my attention is that early September, probably it was posted on the 1st of September, that the CDC released new data saying that 94% of the reported COVID deaths were falsely reported. They admitted that it was falsely reported. Now that gets my attention, that they reported and issued an amendment to the deaths. They said that 94% of the reported deaths had other causes other than COVID-19 alone. Only 6% of the supposedly 180,000 had COVID death or COVID death exclusively pertaining to the virus. Now that's very revealing. That leaves less than 10,000 of the 181,000 less than 10,000 deaths that are exclusively coronavirus related. Now, I'm challenged about that because, listen, every year in America, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, issues some information saying on the influenza normally kills anywhere between 25 to 50,000 Americans every flu season. 25 to 50,000 deaths related to influenza or the flu. And we had less than 10,000 of coronavirus deaths in 2020. Now, I recognize the numbers could go up as we get closer to the fall of this year. But I'm challenged about the devastation we've caused to our economy, to our own health, and certainly to our children who've been out of school for 6 or 7 months because of faulty data and misinformation. And so I want to encourage you, listen, do your homework. Don't just take my word for it. Go and do your homework, do a study, and ask the hard questions about the coronavirus. I believe that we've had more devastation, more difficulties because of the response we had to the virus than the virus itself. It was reported by a very reliable source that 80% of the North Carolina deaths, 80% of them came from the nursing home community and the prison community, prison population. 80+%. Now think about that. What was common about the prison and nursing home is that they're enclosed environments that could not and did not get out. So I want to encourage you, listen, do your homework, check the data. I believe hydroxychloroquine with zinc is a healthy response. I think there's a lot of good data out there. You can go to our website, leonthreatt.com, look at some of the previous articles where Simone Gold posted some good information. Her information is still available, how she believes very strongly hydroxychloroquine is a good treatment. So do your homework. Now, let me mention also, we've tried to talk about this every week for the last several weeks, violence in the American urban cities. The CBN report just this past week, you can go to the website. The report is there, posted by the CBN News, that police officers are walking away from the job in unprecedented numbers all across America. Now, what have we done? This whole mindset, this whole jargon about defunding police has demoralized and frustrated the law enforcement community. We cannot afford law enforcement to leave their posts, and we certainly cannot afford them to leave their jobs in a crisis in which we're facing. So I want to encourage, first of all, I want to encourage my law enforcement friends. You know that I'm a former law enforcement here in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and I am deeply committed and devoted to law enforcement. I know the selfless sacrifices that law enforcement are making every day to go out and defend our community, standing between horrific circumstances and the general public. And they stand in the gap every day. They make real sacrifices. And so I want to encourage my law enforcement family and friends, please don't leave the post. We need you desperately. Listen, there are more for you than are against you. There are more people thanking you and encouraging you to stay on the wall and keep defending freedom and liberty and making our communities and our streets safe. There are more for you. So please stay on post. We're with you. We are with you. I promise you that. And then all of you who are not in law enforcement family, please make it a point to reach out, to encourage, buy a meal for a law enforcement officer. Listen, one of the things I'm purposing to do, we've done it in the past, we'll continue to do it. We'll bring drinks and water and snacks to your local police district. Reach out to the captain or major in that district and say, how can we as citizens in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg region or wherever you're living at, how can we be an encouragement to you? And if they say, hey, listen, you can just bring some water or some snacks or some fruit, then partner with them. Let them know we're here and we stand with you. Reach out to the local chaplain of your law enforcement area and say, how can we be an encouragement to law enforcement? We need them to stay on post, and we commend them. And then without question, pray for law enforcement. Pray that they'll stay encouraged. They'll stay on the wall. They'll do their job. They're safe. They're protected. We need them to do. They don't carry the sword or the gun or wear the badge in vain. They are ministers of God for safety and well-being, and we need them. Now, I'm going to be sharing today and for the next couple of weeks at least on a subject matter that I've been, I'm always asking, how can I be an encouragement. What can I say? And so I'd like to take a couple of weeks. I have 7 points of encouragement for the Black community. 7 points of encouragement or counsel to the Black American. Now, listen, now stay with me before. I don't generally like to use black, white, because I don't really think that way. And I'm trying to encourage others not to think that way. But for the sake of this conversation or this communication, I'm going to use terms like black and white and black church, white church. But I don't really, I'm really making it a point, and I want to encourage others not to think that way, but to communicate a word to communities of color in particular, but certainly to all of us, but in particular to the black community. Now, this is what I would be saying to my children and my grandchildren. These very words. And I think I actually raised my children. I have 3 children directly, a son, daughter, and 2 daughters. One is a 19-year-old, but the other 2 are adults with children. And my wife and I really tried to make life and a real encouragement and real blessing in their life. And we tried to make sure that they were taught and instructed and ministered to with a sense of clarity as it relates to black and white and color and ethnicity and so on. So what I'm going to be sharing with you for the next couple of weeks or so, it may be 3 because I'm running out of time already, the counsel to the Black community or 7 points of encouragement. So understand what I'm doing here. I'm going to speak to the community of color as if I was giving counsel, as if I was speaking to my children and my grandchildren, because my children and grandchildren happen to be Black children, which is not a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing. So first of all, I'd like to, if I was giving counsel, the first thing I'd mention, number 1, let me give you the 7, first of all. Let me give you 7, and then I'll come back and do each one of them individually. And I will not have time today to cover all 7, but these are the 7 points of counsel that I would give to the community of color. Number 1, return to the God of the Bible. Number 1, return to the God of the Bible. Number 2, rebuild the fragmented family, in particular the Black family. Rebuild the fragmented family. Number 3, refuse to live as a victim. Number 3, refuse to live as a victim. And number 4, break covenant with groups and organization of oppression. Break covenant with groups and organizations of oppression. When I get to that one, I may lose a few friends on that one, but that's okay. Number 5, elevate the value of a good education. And when I talk about education, I'm not talking about just going to school and getting a grade and getting a diploma. I'm talking beyond that to a lifestyle of learning. And so, number 5, elevate the value of a good education. And I won't get to that one today, but let me make mention of that just from this point. Learn your history before you begin to speak out. Learn your history. Know your history as people of color. Learn American history, accurate American history. I'll get to that. There's a lot of good information that I want to share on that. Number 6, reclaim the worth of skilled labor and professional trades. If I was going to give counsel to people of color, particularly Black Americans, is get back into skilled labor and professional trades. Okay? You can go to college, but you don't have to go to college without a skill. You can learn a skill and still go to college. I'm going to enjoy that one. Last but not least, remember, we are our brother's keeper. The 2 leading causes of death of a Black person are both preventable and both made or done by choice. The taking of the preborn and Black on Black crime are the 2 number 1 causes of death of a Black citizen in America. So we're going to enjoy this subject matter. And today, let's start with number 1, if I may, and that is returned to the God of the Bible. Listen, I believe without question that it was and is the goodness of God that has brought Black citizens through the hardships and difficulties that we face as a culture. You know, Black citizens or Americans. Now, listen to the way I say this. I try to say Americans that are Black, but it doesn't kind of flow like I want it to, because it seems like it's a little bit longer. But my intent is to say Americans that are Black, not Black Americans, because the emphasis I want to make is on being Americans. We are one people. I got a good friend of mine one of my mentors, you've heard me refer to him quite often, is Bishop E.W. Jackson out of Virginia. He's the president and leader of the STAND organization, which I am, in fact, a partner and a part of. But Bishop E.W. Jackson says, we may have come to America in different ships, but we're in the same boat now. That's why I say Americans that are black. And he also says that America's problems are not skin, but sin. I still believe, as a believer and one who loves God with all his heart, mind, and soul, that is at the core of what we're dealing with. And so it is only by the goodness of God, it is only by the grace of God that black citizens survived and thrived beyond slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, and welfare. All worked toward the demise of the black culture. And I've asked a hard question: why would God permit black citizens, Africans, to be brought to America, enslaved for generations? Why would he permit that? The only thing I can come up with is that God had to have a plan that was more urgent and more important than the struggle that one would endure. God had a plan. Why would God permit the Egyptians to enslave the Israelites for 417 years? Why would he permit that? Only because he had a greater purpose. When Israel left Egypt, they went in a family, they came out a nation. When the 10,000 slaves, some have estimated about 10,000 slaves from Africa came to America and were put in servitude. Now, I'm sure some of you are going to say, oh no, it's far more than that. Well, one indicator said it was approximately 10,000. Why would God permit that? Only because there was something more important. And I've asked the question, what could be so important that God would permit such hardships? Now, first of all, let's make this real clear. The whole world was in fact, in the 14th, 15th, 16th century, the world was in slave trade. It wasn't just Africans. It was Asians were put in slave. Europeans were put in slavery. Just so happens, the British and the Portuguese seem to have been involved in African slave trade as much as any group. Okay. So, but why would God? That's the big question. Why would God permit that? Because I believe he had a greater purpose. What would God permit? Why would he permit that? Because I believe he wanted America to be the melting pot of the world. Secondly, I believe God wanted Africans or blacks or Africans or blacks that are Americans to be a part of his eternal plan. Now, if you do your history, you'll find out that in the 14th, 15th, 16th century, much of Africa was in voodoo and witchcraft. Now, I'm not saying that. History says it, and certainly those of us who have friendships and relationships with those in the continent of Africa, much of Africa was in black magic, voodoo, witchcraft, and so on. Okay, it's just a fact. Don't get mad at me. Just do the history. And I believe that God's plan for the whole world is that the gospel of Jesus Christ would reach that people group. I believe the greatest gift to humanity is a saving grace given and offered by the Lord Jesus Christ. And so if God would permit the Israelites to go into Egypt and find themselves in slavery for 417 years, and God would permit Africans to be brought to America to help build America, I'm sorry, it's just the truth. We help build the economy. We help build infrastructure. We help build the nation. And any place you build and sow and invest life and labor, you're entitled to return. You're entitled to compensation. And listen, I'm not going anywhere. This is my country, and I got too much seed and too much labor into the land to leave it abandoned. So this is our land, and you need to see that. You need to see yourself as a vital part of God's plan here in America. Let me say it real quick, make it real clear. God had a plan, and a wonderful plan to make sure that African heritage, or blacks or Americans with African or black heritage, would be a vital part of the tapestry and the plan of America. I know that. I believe it with all my heart, mind, and soul. And that's one reason why I'm not angry and mad. God had a plan. If I'm going to be mad, I have to be mad at God for having a plan that would include me and include my heritage. Yes, men failed miserably in the formation of this nation. But the failures of some did not delete or make void the eternal plan of God. God had a plan to make a great nation, and he would include us. He made it a point that we would be a part of the foundation of America. He didn't wait until the nation was up and running and everything was flourishing, blessed nation, now blacks would come to America. He didn't wait till then. He made sure from the very foundation, people of color would be a part of this great melting pot. I'm so grateful. Let me tell you the story. Let me tell you this story. I've gone to Africa a number of times, in particular to South Africa. And I remember on one of my South African trips, I was there and we were doing ministry to Afrikaans. That's the black portion of South Africa. And you have to understand a little bit about South Africa. It has Afrikaans, it has coloreds, it has Indians, and it has whites. It has all these different groups, and they're different. The most numerous group is Afrikaans. They're the black part of Africa. And I remember we went to a township there, and we were feeding, we were ministering, and I remember somewhere in our travels meeting these two missionaries who happened to be American blacks who were doing missions work in South Africa. And they were so ecstatic and encouraged to see us there because this is what they said. They said most of Afrikaans and most Africans only see white missionaries coming, and they are so encouraged when they see American blacks coming to share the gospel. And they said, they asked the question, is it possible? This is one of the reasons why God permitted blacks to end up in America, to bring back the gospel. And that's always stuck with me. There is such a benefit to being able to bring a message of redemption and hope to a land that at one point did not have it. Most of the world did not have the gospel. The greatest gift ever given to a people is the liberating truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I find it so refreshing. Let me give you this right here. I had a good friend of mine. I so appreciate him. He's in a powerful ministry. And we were talking and praying and discussing the urgent need for an awakening in America. This was a few years ago. Some would call it a revival. I prefer to use the word an awakening to the truth of who Jesus is and to the message of redemption that Jesus Christ offers. And I remember he and I discussing this, and he made this statement to me. He said, Pastor Threatt, now understand my language. I'm only using this language because that's the conversation. And some people use this language, but I prefer not to. But he said, if the black church would lead our nation in revival, the white church would follow. I stopped and thought, why would he made this statement. Now, he is a brother of a lighter hue. And he said, if the black church would lead America in an awakening or revival, the white church would follow. And I examined it and I thought about it. God, why would he make that statement? Because he believed it to be true. He, in his own admittance of truth, he said that he believes that the church of color, the black church in particular, has a message and has an insight and a spiritual depth that would help move America forward. Is it possible that God has ordained the church of color for such a time as this, the black church in particular? Now, let me put that in perspective. Isn't it interesting, if you stop and think about this, isn't it interesting right now when a nation needs Christ at its greatest degree, the black culture, the community of color, is leading the nation in anarchy? Isn't it interesting that the deep state, lying, liberal, godless left is actually mobilizing the black culture against America? I said, I'm not apologizing for that. I don't care what anyone thinks about that. That's what's happening. The community of color, the black culture, the black community has been weaponized against America to try to dismantle America. And in essence, this is in fact the spirit of the Antichrist working against America. Let me ask this question. If you tear down America, where can you go? If we destroy this constitutional republic, what other land do we have to go to? I also find it interesting. Those ones who want to destroy America, most of them have never left America, have never left the shores of this great land. Now, I admit there are a lot of things we got to work on. There's a lot of things we've got to fix. There's a lot of things we've got to do better. But you don't destroy the nation because there are ills and failures of the human heart. You repair and mend and make right the failures of the past. We don't destroy America. And this whole notion that somehow we'd be better off as a socialist communist nation, I'm sorry, that is not an option. I believe that God had a plan and does have a plan for the church, and in particular, Black America in the American fabric. Do you know, when you study history, and I love history, is that the civil rights movement of the 1960s, partly led by Dr. Martin Luther King, that much of that movement was, in fact, a spiritual movement. We call it a civil rights movement, but it was, in fact, an awakening in the church and an awakening in the culture. And it brought America to a point of consciousness of the failure of America as a whole. And so I think it's important that we understand that God had a plan, still has a plan to redeem and restore and strengthen America. And I believe he's going to use the Black culture as a part of that. He's not going to exclude the Black culture. So may I encourage my people of a darker hue, Americans that are Black, don't forget the goodness of God. I want to challenge you to go back to the God who made America great. Go back to the God of the Bible. Go back, get back to truth, and get back to living his plans and his purposes. Don't let someone deceive you, mislead you to think somehow that the failures of some, the mismanagement of areas of government and public policy, their failure somehow nullifies, neutralizes God's divine intent for you and I as people of color. God has a plan, and I think we must get back to living for him and serving him. It was his goodness that has preserved and blessed and enriched communities of color. And so I want to challenge us to get back to church. And I'm not talking about just getting back to religion. I'm talking about get back to a point where we're living for the Lord and we're living a set apart life, honoring him in how we live and how we carry ourselves. Let me give you the second point. I may not be able to get all of this today, but I'm going to give you the second point. The first point I say is we need to get back as a people of color, Black Americans. We need to return to the God of the Bible. Secondly, I mentioned we need to rebuild the fragmented family. Now, this one, I may have to only give you a taste of this one because this requires a tremendous amount of engagement. We've got to rebuild the fragmented family. The family is the cornerstone of civilized society. In every society, the family is a central bedrock. It is the cornerstone. It is the part of the structure that everything else is built out of. And when the family falters, the social pillars of our society also are destroyed. And so it is said at this point that in less than 50 years, the Black family went from being the intact family, the nuclear family of mother, father, and children. We went from being over 72% of intact Black families to now 72% of every Black child born in America is born into a single family setting. In 50 years. Now, I'm going to talk about some things through this subject matter of rebuilding the fragmented family. There were a lot of things that's happened in the last 50 years. One of the things that happened is welfare. Welfare was offered under the Johnson administration, and it was introduced. Now, I don't have the tape, but someone said there's a tape where Johnson says if we could get, he was referring to the Democratic Party, if we, the Democratic Party, would institute welfare for the Black culture, the Black community, then we will have them voting Democrats, he said, for 200 years. Now, if someone can find that tape, it's probably on YouTube, where he made that statement. That's shameful. Welfare has hurt the community, the family in particular, as much as anything else has. But let me give you a lot of good information. I think the re-strengthening and rebuilding of the nuclear family, father, mother, children, is the single most important piece, other than coming back to God himself. and which will help restore and strengthen the black family and the black culture. It is what's hurting the black culture. Now, it's hurting all of culture. Black, white, brown, red, everyone. All of the communities are being devastated by the broken family. But for whatever reason, it seems to have the most devastating impact in the black culture more than any other group or people group. Let me give you something that I want to challenge you to go look up. I've read much of this report. It's called the Moynihan Report. Patrick Moynihan, who was a congressman, who in 1965 published a paper. Interesting enough, he published it when Johnson is in the administration. He published it and sharing what was going on and how to begin to elevate in his report, how to make changes, how to bring good public policy to the black, in particular to impact the black culture. But in his report, he indicates if the black family was to be broken up, he listed a number of ills that would take place. And he was so accurate because many of the ills that he predicted would happen has already happened. He mentioned, and remember, when he writes this report, the intact family in the black community was 70+% of nuclear family, mother, father, children. But he said if the family is broken up, at the same time, the Johnson administration is introducing welfare. He says if the family is broken up, the ills would be endless. That it would, in fact, it would decline literacy, increase the percentage of teen pregnancy, teen delinquency, high incarceration rates, and increase poverty and growing hopelessness. That portion certainly was my part. But he listed, so if you would take a moment, look up Moynihan Report. His last name is spelled M-O-Y-N-I-H-A-N, Moynihan. And look at that report, look at and just kind of dig in. Now, there are certainly a lot of controversy over it, and there's a lot of question whether it's legitimate and all of that, but the report was done, and we're living much of the things that he said would happen has already happened. I find it interesting that in the family, that right now a higher percentage of black citizens are incarcerated. I think the number is like 40-something% of everyone incarcerated are black. That's frightening to think about that. But it is in fact because of the breakdown of the family. I believe that's at the center. And what's interesting, when you talk about breaking down the family, we've got to look at what impact does marriage have. Now, there was a report, and if you can also go look this up. It's called the Marriage Index. And it's a wonderful piece of information, just have a lot of good data on marriage. And if you want to look up this particular report, you can go to www.americanvalues.org and you can get a look at the Marriage Index. But in the Marriage Index, listen to this statement. My wife has indicated time is up. Okay. The Marriage Index makes this statement that marriage has the greatest means of breaking childhood poverty than any other single issue or matter. Marriage. Not a man and a woman living together, but marriage. We're going to talk more about this. We're going to get into fatherlessness next week on the Threatt Report. I've just given you an introduction on rebuilding the fragmented family. I also mentioned to you the importance of the people of color, the black culture, returning to the God who has sustained us and made it possible for us to be a thriving, blessed, anointed people as we are. Now, let me finish up. Remember, you can go to the website, leonthreatt.com, or you can go to the Threatt Report, threattreport@gmail.com to email me. But again, in closing, let me give you this. In closing, some walkaways, some takeaways, please. I mentioned, and if I haven't not mentioned, that last day to register to vote was on 9 October. Early voting starts, I believe, on the 12th or 13th of October. You want to listen. You want to vote in person. Don't rely upon a mail-in ballot. I know in North Carolina we have mail-in ballots. Absentee ballots is what they're called. Absentee ballots. We don't have mailing ballots in North Carolina, but we do have absentee ballots. But I want to encourage you: don't do an absentee ballot. Do a in-person voting, because there are plans from the dark side of the agenda to misrepresent your vote. And if you show up at a poll and give your vote in a polling, you have a higher percentage of your vote counting. So, closing, pray, fast, and repent for where the church is and where the nation is. Examine the issues. Be a student of the issue. Engage the process. Find others that you can talk to and encourage them to vote and vote biblically. Speak out, speak up, and refuse to be silent on the issues. Guard the unity of the church and the unity of the nation. Support and stand with law enforcement and our military, and demand that our elected officials enforce the laws and keep our streets safe and businesses safe. And then when you vote, vote pro-life candidates only. That's everyone from the presidency all the way down to judges and to local municipalities. Only vote pro-life. And if you want to know how to vote pro-life, go to the website, leonthreatt.com, and we have a voter guide there. Only vote pro-life. Listen, I'll be back next week on the Threatt Report. Be encouraged, be blessed, and I'll see you then. Thank you, and God bless you.